So just out the door and on your right. If there's an earthquake, drop cover and hold. If we evacuate, please go down the stairs, not the lift, and out to Stay Street. So please make sure our phones are in silent. And just a reminder that these proceedings are being recorded for the purpose of live video. And so by remaining in this meeting, you consent to being filmed for viewing by the public. I've got an apology from Councillor Byers and Councillor Graney, although Councillor Graney is going to endeavour to come in for the Milford agenda item today. Can I have a move for that apology, please? Councillor Dobson and Councillor Menzies. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Do we have any leave of absence coming up for anybody?
Mr Mayor, 26th of May to the 2nd of June.
Cool,
Sadly, we'll miss out on Stewart Island.
What number, June?
2nd.
Cool, if there's nothing further, someone like to move that that's accepted? Thank you, Councillor Boper, seconded by Councillor Keast. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. All right, are there any items on the agenda today that anyone has a conflict of interest that they'd like to declare?
Just noting that I was involved in the plan change as decision maker.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Nothing further. We don't have any additional agenda items today. I'm going to change the order around a little bit as we get through, but it's not going to be material. We've got our minutes from our meetings on the 1st and the 8th of April. Someone in a position to move those? Councillor Spraggan, seconded by Councillor Boper. Any discussion on those at all? Cool, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Now, we do have public participation today, which is great, and I'd like to welcome Nathan Surendran, who's the chairperson of the Wise Responsible Society, to come and address us. So, welcome, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you for receiving this delegation this morning. So I'm here today to speak to you about the global fuel supply crisis, which is an ongoing risk which I believe the Council should be paying close attention to. My background is an energy systems engineer, starting at the sort of building scale and energy flows within a building, designing systems to manage those flows, and then widening my interest out to the global energy system. And in that context, I've been communicating with councils in the region and central government through the Wise Response Society over the last 10 years or so, trying to help people to understand the growing risk of the type of disruption that we're now seeing as a result of energy resource depletion trends which are occurring globally, which are leading to increased competition for the remaining resources, which obviously then leads to geopolitical tension and the sorts of crisis that we're seeing. Next slide, please, for whoever's controlling those. So the situation in brief is that the Iran conflict has led to the International Energy Agency saying that this is the greatest threat to global energy security in history. Sorry, that slide's gone back again. Around 20% of global oil supply, which is actually around 40% of traded global oil supply, has been taken out of the global supply, and 20% of liquefied natural gas has also been disrupted. Often when we talk about these things in the general sort of public discourse in New Zealand, there's a point that's missed, which is a very important point, which relates to our understanding of economics, and that is that the financial system, the economy, is fundamentally an energy system which happens to use money. It's not a financial system which happens to use energy. And as such, economic analysis and projections of the scale of the disruption that are commensurate with that level of disruption to energy flows globally often systemically underestimate the scale of the potential impacts. And that is the context in which the current central government is operating. There's a lot of neoclassical assumptions, which I won't go into the detail of, but suffice it to say that we can see a potential disruption, not just relating to the 20% of global oil supply, but also bearing in mind that as the French government has confirmed through its analysis, something in the region of 30 to 40% of the infrastructure that facilitates that supply has been damaged or destroyed. We're looking at timelines measured in years to reinstate that infrastructure. We import 100% of refined fuel, roughly a month or two of diesel onshore at any given point. We are still in phase one of a four-phase national fuel plan, and we don't have any idea, because the government hasn't yet communicated it, how they will choose to allocate fuel volumes in the event of absolute fuel shortages and rationing. I'm also pointing here to the second and third order effects of this fuel supply shortage, because also from the Persian Gulf area comes a significant proportion of urea fertilizer that's supplied globally, and also through the sulfur that's refined out of the crude oil that's supplied from the region, a significant amount of sulfuric acid, which again affects rock phosphate processing for fertilizer, and also mining operations globally for all sorts of metals and so on. So there is a big knock-on effect here, and we are, because of the time lags involved in the global economy, not yet seeing anything like the full impact of what we can expect in coming months and years as a result of this crisis. What we are seeing already is a massive affordability crisis based on the fuel price spikes, and we're likely to see those trickle on to manufactured goods next. I've heard murmurings just from the construction sector as an example, that something like a 50% increase in the cost of goods delivered through that sector is likely in coming months. You know, that's just one sector. So I want to impress on you, this is not a temporary price spike. This is a multi-year global energy shortage crisis with knock-on effects through the entire global economy, and all of the assumptions that we've made about the forward operating environment within which you are being expected to plan. So next slide, please. SDC has has many exposures to this risk environment, and the three biggest ones that I want to highlight to you here are roading. Sorry, that's the wrong slide. Back one slide, please. One more, that's it, yep. So roading, obviously, the largest network in New Zealand, I should say, sorry, mostly unsealed. Grading is continuous and diesel intensive, and under rationing, every road needs a category in terms of its criticality for food, for humans, livestock movements, school buses, emergency lines, etc. And you need to be planning and understanding what those different categories are for the different parts of your roading network. If you haven't already got an explicit statement around that, you need to be working one up so that when the time comes and rationing is implemented, and as I say, we are looking at outright shortages of fuel in coming months, then you actually have a basis on which to implement prioritisation. Similarly, for your rural water schemes, there's, a lot of those, and you need to audit your chemicals and spare parts and look at actually, do we have sufficient spares in stock to see us through the sorts of disruptions that I'm talking about, and to effectively stockpile now. Everyone thinks about Stewart Island in terms of energy, and the energy cost increases as the direct result of the diesel price increases, which is absolutely a concern. We also need to be thinking about Stewart Island and also all other remote communities around the periphery of the region, Tianau, Riversdale, the list goes on, in terms of supply of food for human consumption, as well as water supply through the water schemes. I'm asking that you think about this in terms of what I'm calling an agricultural paradox, which is that we produce food for the world, export, processing, etc., but our own residents could be at risk of facing shortages because the disruptions in logistics of those local supply chains, even Piper's carrots trucking up to Christchurch and back, may not be possible in those situations if we don't plan effectively for it. So I'm asking the Council to consider convening or facilitating a collective plan response, and I think that should be region-wide, so it should incorporate Invercargill City Council, because, it's pretty clear that, your average rural Southlander can go down the road and talk to the neighbour and get a sheep or whatever, and there's not much of a problem there. But the problem will come in the city, where actually, if there is a significant disruption to food supply to the city, then we will need some coordinated action across the region to ensure food supply for the urban areas. It's not just Invercargill, it's the other larger settlements, Winton, etc. Next slide, please. The other thing that I'm pointing you to is the fact that as a result of this crisis and the economic knock-on effects, your debt servicing may be a potential problem for you. The debt covenants that you have assume stable rates, revenue, insurance coverage and asset values, and all three of those are at risk. Rates arrears will rise if ratepayer incomes fall. Insurance is tightening globally, both as a result of this crisis and more generally in terms of the ongoing effects of climate disruption and increased frequency of severe weather events. And property values, as a result of all of that, are potentially going to contract. And the rating base will shrink. You do have powers under the existing Local Government Rating Act 2002 to remit, postpone or defer rates. I recognise that's usually done on a case-by-case basis. What I'm suggesting here is developing a systemic rates relief framework now before it's needed. Again, a bit of a proactive sort of, you can see this coming, have a think about how you actually manage that going forwards, and engage with LGFA proactively regarding financial stress scenarios, etc. And the note I've made at the bottom there is that councils that do this before a credit review is forced on them are in a materially better position. Next slide, please. So what I'm asking councils to consider, and I put this in my letter to you, which I hope you've read, operational triage, rural water and Stewart Island, this agricultural engagement around food supply, financial preparedness, and then a couple of other things. Energy policy advocacy. So as a wise response, we have put out an open letter to government on essential fuel allocation being explicitly stated. That is to say, you know, who gets what fuel in the case of outright rationing. And then also investigation of tradable energy quotas, which is a financial mechanism that allows for the equitable distribution of fuel in a fuel-constrained environment going forwards. And there's links to both of those there as well. So you can learn more about those if you're unaware of those issues. And then lastly, community board activation. So direct your community boards to begin contingency planning, food and water supply in particular, and around mutual aid arrangements so that the people of the district are prepared for what's coming and are having active conversations about preparedness in the light of the severity of this crisis. I would like a written response from council, ideally within 7 days. You've had my letter for a couple of weeks nearly now, and I am available to brief staff or talk to any individual councillors if you have questions at any time. Next slide, please. I'll leave you with this. The situation is moving faster than the official timelines suggest, and let's take positive steps to ensure that things are better than they otherwise would be.
Well, thank you. Did well getting that just in the 10 minutes as well. That was well done. Just a couple of questions from me before I open up to the floor. It's interesting when you talk about the fuel, and it's also in plastics for our pipes and stuff as well.
100%.
So crucial. You talked about deferring the rates and coming up with a model for that. Now, noting that we need that income to be able to...
I do note that, yes.
So what do you see as the alternative? Like if we were to set up a scheme to defer rates, it's almost taking on a different mode for how councils normally operate. So how do you see us dealing with the other side of that, of not having the cash flow to actually operate?
The reality is that the cash flow that you have to operate comes from the community, and if the community doesn't have the cash, then you don't have it anyway. What I'm suggesting is that you have a plan in place so that that is equitably distributed across the ratepayer base, rather than it being something that you have to deal with on a case-by-case crisis. It'll be an overwhelming volume of claims and requests for deferments. And so what I'm saying is you need to proactively plan for that. I don't know is the honest answer to how you actually deal with that from a fiscal perspective. You know, it may be that you need to take on extra debt. It may be that the government is going to have to introduce some sort of either debt jubilee, or, I mean, there's there's a variety of mechanisms depending on the severity of the crisis, which are potentially should be under consideration. I don't know what's going on at the central government level. I mean, it's clear that from their own communications, they should already be at least at phase 2 of the National Fuel Plan. The criteria have been, half of the criteria that they published have been met for that escalation, and yet it hasn't happened. So, you know, I did communicate with central government a little bit towards the start of this crisis. It's clear that they're stuck in some sort of, I'm guessing, ideological trap around this. And so my attention is now moving to what can be done at the local level in the face of central government inaction on this matter.
Because that was my next question in terms of central government engagement, and just a comment around that. We keep getting messages on our core responsibilities, and I think that social welfare income stuff lies more in Wellington than at council. I think it puts us under a lot of pressure locally when we have a limited take.
I'm really very conscious of that. I think, you know, this is business as unusual, you know, and we need to think outside the box. And really, you know, my comments today and, you know, the things I put in the letter to you and in that associated No Fuel Still Fed paper, which I included a link to, are really designed to stimulate thinking about what those alternative arrangements might be, what we might need to consider. I don't have all the answers. I'm simply hoping to start the question, get the ball rolling. You know, I went back through the last month of council meetings and just did a quick analysis of the transcripts. No real discussion of the fuel supply crisis up until this point in council meetings, and I'm saying that has to change. We have to take the situation seriously. It is going to get worse, and we need to plan a response. Otherwise, we'll be responding anyway, and it'll be an unplanned and chaotic manner.
Just to let you know, we do have an IMT set up already behind the scenes, so we might not be discussing it publicly, but there is the work going on behind the scenes.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
I'll open up the table for any questions.
Just one. Thanks, Nathan. Just in regards to like the financial preparedness and forecasting, I'm asking if you're an economic expert in this, but as far as what you foresee and raising awareness on in terms of the financial markets investments and you've raised the financial vulnerability around debt servicing and potentially the revenue income from rates and things. Have you got any comments on reserves invested in the financial markets and balance funds and what this kind of economic energy born crisis could mean to...
Okay, so it's clear that we have both economic stagnation and inflation occurring simultaneously at this point. That's stagflation is the economic term for that. In those scenarios, markets tend to drop, and because of the scale of this crisis, that drop could be very significant. So, you know, in a general sense, I think the investment advice going into a situation like this is to move out of financial investments into physical assets, and you know, typically that's gold and that sort of thing. From an individual investment perspective, I think it's a different scenario where you have an individual council or you know, TA invested in things like that. The move should be to take some of that money and put it into things where you can see cost inflation affecting your operating costs and your capital expenditure going forward, and actually defer some of that potential further capital expenditure by buying stuff up front and holding it in reserve, particularly around your three water schemes and so on.
So potentially breaking into the rainy day fund?
I believe that is effectively what we're facing, and that's really what we should be doing, yes.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll take a final question from Bill, then we'll need to wrap this up.
Thanks, Nathan. You might be able to answer this. It's sort of a question and a statement at the same time. In a region such as Southlands, where we're primary producers, although somewhere like Fonterra and Open Country might be potentially putting less trucks on the road, the reality is that they're going to be doing the same amount of mileage to collect milk, albeit at the end of the season. Stock trucks, all of our essential services there are using the same amount of fuel. That fuel and diesel has essentially doubled in the last month.
Correct.
Although what do we call our taxes and levies are not on a percentage basis, they're on a fixed amount. The GST on that would have doubled. And something that I haven't heard much about in the media about what that extra GST is actually being used for, because I think essentially central government could be just sitting there counting a little bit of extra cash and thinking this is going to be handy come budget time in May and leading into a new election. So I just wondered, when we're talking about engagement with central government, is that something we can talk about? We know we talk about our rucks and getting our fair share back, but while the rest of the country is, going to come to a standstill because we are still going about it. We're feeding the country, we're feeding the world.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we need to just start knocking on some doors and shaking some trees and asking for a little bit of that GST back, because that might be actually a good way to line the pots when we're talking about rates relief.
I think that will be an excellent strategy.
I'm glad I thought of it.
That's great. Thank you, Nathan. And your presentation just highlights we've become a very global dependent economy, and a weak link in there and everything starts to crumble. So we're in interesting times. It seems to be one crisis after the next at the moment, and I wonder what's coming next. But
100%. And I don't envy your task, but thank you for listening to me today. And as I say, I am available if anyone wants to talk to me individually about this and bounce any ideas around, etc.
Awesome. Thank you for taking the time to
Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda, and they're eagerly waiting there, we've got the Great South Update to Council. This is on page 9. Welcome, Charmy and potentially her team, or just Charmy?
Yes, no, Charmy and the team. Thank you, Your Worship, and good morning. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be back here, and the team is here so that you can hear from them directly on the areas of responsibility they hold. I'd just like to acknowledge the work and what you said, Mayor Rob, that it is very challenging times. We've got crisis after crisis, and trying to drive economic growth through that is a bit of a challenge. Today, of course, we're here just to present on our Q2 achievements. So that was up until 31st of December last year. Well, before the world sort of is trying to blow up. I'm just very quickly going to go through a few slides and then hand it over to the team. So there we go. Sorry. So I'd just like to remind the council that everything that we do is around ensuring that our people can enjoy even better lives through sustainable regional development. And the word sustainable is becoming more and more prevalent and more important as we move through the different challenges that the world is facing. We still are working across our 4 priority areas, and the executive team here will be taking you through their respective sort of responsibilities. I'm really pleased to say that, from a performance snapshot, we're well on track to achieve what we said that we were going to achieve. We had 39 KPIs. And as I discussed in the workshop for the joint shareholders for the next LTP, we're really going to look at how we can consolidate that and show greater value for our councils that are funding us, and show the coexistence of what we do to economic development and growth. Just some standout outcomes from us, so like our tourism, media for mills, that's really going really good guns, and I think the Southern Way has been a standout sort of framework for collaboration, which we want to now use for greater economic development opportunities. I won't go into this too much because the team will speak to this, but we just know that the time is probably right for us to start developing a framework on how the Lower South can, our region, lead the Lower South and the economic growth with our neighbouring regions as well. So I'm going to hand over to Bobby.
Cool, radio. So 9 slides in 5 minutes. So Stefan. So good morning, everybody. Nice to be here again. So this diagram we show every time. So this is when we just look at all the things that are happening and try to understand collectively, what is happening across the region. So from the last time we were here, we've had the Contact Energy wind farm consent through. Fonterra's UHT cream plant is on track, and that's due to open shortly. So they're very pleased with progress there. And we've also had Data Grid consent go through as well. Dawn Meats is in with Alliance, so that's getting embedded in, and we're looking forward to understanding how that will roll out further. But I guess the key point here is we're trying to understand the impact of some of these major developments in terms of timing, construction, workforce, because of course we want our businesses and locals to benefit. So in terms of GDP, you might have seen in the media, Southland's GDP growth was the largest or highest of all the regions up to end of March 25. So there's always a 2-year lag with GDP. But while we only have 2% share of New Zealand's GDP, the big stat there is the GDP per capita, which is the highest it's ever been and the highest out of all of the New Zealand at the moment since they began this in 2000. So it's $95,061 per person. Ngāi Tahu Seafood's Hananui project, which is the salmon farm off Stewart Island, so they're moving through fast track process. We'll have an outcome of that end of July, beginning of August. So what that's meant is it's triggered us to look at the following 4 things. So infrastructure, how do we prepare? What's the implication? Supply chain logistics as well. And also spatial planning with the City Council. Obviously Bluff fits within there, but this will also link through to Rakiura and the spatial planning that's happening there. And that leads us to spatial planning, which of course is a high priority for your council. And I guess from Great South's point of view, we're just very keen to support the work that's happening. That's happening in a couple of ways. One is data, and we've got an MOU with the Regional Council, Environment Southland, to make sure we get consistent data that can be trusted. And of course, some of the data sets need to be looked at, and there's a bit of a process for that, particularly around natural hazards. But of course, with our role with industry, we're quite a key conduit and support for councils, so councils don't have to have all those relationships, you can just use us. Okay, the final point on this slide is just the fact that Beyond 25 talked about enablers in terms of economic growth and diversification, and that's definitely coming to fruition in terms of housing, energy, water, regulation, data. Okay, and this is just a wee quick example of another thing we're doing for you, which is a separate contract, which are the housing business assessments with spatial planning. So it just brings together a lot of data, and then when you do look at it with the long-term lens, you can start to see some different trends. So for example, in Tuatapere, your median house price has risen 417% in 20 years, so from 60,000 through to 310,000. Then we also look at things like how many Airbnbs, how many commercial beds, how many businesses, and when we put all that together, that goes into your planning, which means that you've got the best available data. Only 1 residential building consent in the last 5 years for Tuatapere. Okay, as Charmy mentioned, or it was on the slide before, one of our KPIs was around implementing the housing action plan. So we're really pleased that we've completed 5 of those 13 projects. So that's where your Build Southland website comes in. So remember, that's a one-stop shop for people who want to move or a builder wanting to link into, each council and understand rules, or just somebody wanting to sell their house. Also, all the data's on Dish, so there's housing reports and dashboards. And the other thing we did was we supported the councils with looking at building consent, their processes, just to give an independent view, which was ticked off too. So what's coming up with housing? Lots, because it's quite important. So we've got 3 things that we'll aim to have or continue to do. So one is around ageing sector. So obviously we're finding the number of older folk over 65 is growing. So we want to understand how that relates through to housing. The second is understanding how we can do housing different by looking at case studies of elsewhere, and that will be, we'll start them and get them underway. And then that Project 9 is really the alignment of housing with spatial planning and infrastructure provision, so really crucial. And so supporting your spatial planning process, your infrastructure planning, etc., is a focus for us, so it all lines up. Okay, so 2 more slides. I think I'm good for time. So just some key facts for rents and housing prices. So for you guys, some of your rents have eased off, some highs, because remember we had quite steep growth, and in particular Lumsden and Balfour, we've seen a bit of an ease off, but the rents are continuing to rise in places like Riverton, Wallistown, Edendale Woodlands and Wyndham Catlins. And some of the other towns are sort of staying the same. So you'll see there your median rent price is $460 a week, which is just below Invercargill at 490, and New Zealand is 610. Last slide. Your house prices. So yeah, look, you've got the highest house prices in the region, and that's your average is $569,000. That New Zealand figure of 910, that often gets skewed by some of the larger properties in Auckland, but you can sort of see where you fit with the rest of the region. Again, you've had increases in some places and decreases in others, so that's quite interesting to see. And again, the number of sales, that can affect those figures too, so that's why we track it over time. That's it. Hydration.
Kia ora, everybody. Look, this is a snapshot from that Q2, but I think to make it a little bit more relevant today, I'll just talk also about the trends we've seen across the season off the back of Q2. These insights and numbers are all available on Dish, and the quarterly report, which this comes off, is also on Dish. If you want to jump on there, they're there, sitting there for consumption, so get in there and have a look at them. Look, guest nights have continued to grow across the region, international and surprisingly domestic. A lot of domestic, I think, is based off growth around some of the holiday regions like Te Anau, where the housing growth is bringing domestic visitors back in batches and things like that. So, but the international has continued to grow. And that's come across the season. We've seen a big bounce back, and you'll see that in the Milford numbers and things like that. So we reflect off the back of that. And monthly occupancy rates have just continued to watch and grow across both Fiordland and the Southland RTOs. The standout has been the international spend, especially for Fiordland, because we saw the big bounce back there, but it has been across all of Southland as well. And what we've seen is, in total spend, has remained relatively solid compared to the drop-off in domestics, which has been that's the backfill from that domestic spend. So we're just seeing international flows across the region and that international spend supporting. For events, as Mayor pointed out when we started this, we've had a number of disruptions across the year. We started with a big one, which was a big storm at the end of September. So that meant we've, in the results, we've had fewer large-scale events. And that weather played a big part in that. And we've also seen that we've had a geopolitical storm to finish the season. So that will have an effect on some things as well. And events are harder to keep happening. Cost and resourcing is putting a struggle on all events, both community and our large ones. Business events were down, and that was most of our business events, which are conferences and incentives and things coming to town, versus our community events, which is events that our communities attend and go to, is really a reflection of the domestic environment. It was tough going in, it's been tough coming through the other side. But what we have seen is the number of business delegates coming has remained stable, even though we've had less events. So those events that have come have been longer, which is good because it's good quality. So, and look, just our focus as we have been going forward, it's a challenging global outlook. In terms of how we came through the end of the season, it was a strong season, both domestically and international. We kind of held up. We didn't see too many disruptions in international visitation. We're really lucky that it happened toward the end of the season. In February, March, we start coming off that peak. And if you look at the feedback from over winter, which is we get a lot of day visitation from Queenstown over winter, which is what we rely on because it's an off-peak for us. In terms of in Fiordland is in other parts of Southland is Queenstown secured the bookings. Their bookings are looking pretty solid, and that's because they were pre-bought. We'll need to see what happens once the season's here, but things are looking okay. Spring's probably September is where the question marks now sit, and we can't answer those. It's out of our control, so we just continue to work the domestic and East Coast Australia markets That's all we can do, so that we just keep front and centre in those markets. We continue to drive the regional spread, and the Southern Way, as Shami alluded to, is becoming more and more of a powerful weapon for us to be able to build a broader story around the region. And just up there on the right in that image is Te Anau Airport. There's a group that was down last week. They represent probably 80% of the high quality visitation to New Zealand. And we wanted to use the airport as an example of how do you differentiate coming in to a region. Why not fly in rather than come by road? That group went round, joined a company called Cheeky Kiwi, which has been did a seasonal trial around the region of hop-on, hop-off coach, which is you can go to a place, jump off and then catch the next bus coming through. It's not an itinerised tour. And so that trial went over summer. It's gone really, really well. So they're going to continue that. So that group went through Te Anau down to Riverton, Invercargill, through the Catlins, up to Dunedin, across the Maniatoto, through Central, back to Queenstown, and flew out. So we're starting to get real legs on in that space, mainly because we have the assets in the region. We've got improving accommodation quality and numbers, and that's given us the opportunity to use those brands such as Pia Tahi, Te Anau, and Invercargill as a hub to grow and push and feed around the region, which is really, really good. So promotion and sporting events, supporting events is a key. We're about to refresh the event strategy, and that's about to get underway, completion at the end of June, so we're just going to stakeholders now and to start that process. I'll catch up with you about that, Louise, in the, so thank you.
Yes, Pure councillors. Look, I'll just quickly cover off the key focus areas for us, for our team. We are on target or completed most of our KPIs for the year, as well as tackling some of these really large projects. But anyway, energy is one front and centre for this region. Cropping, alternative cropping and high value cropping is another area of focus for us. Emissions reduction across the region and the distinct advantages to exporters is a very big focus for us. Water and long-term availability of high purity potable water is particularly important. Air travel, I won't talk about this too much in this presentation, simply to say that we had 2,326 surveys from individuals, so survey responses in total, 1921 from individuals representing about 4,500 people, and 405 businesses, mostly the largest businesses in the region, representing 12,000 employees. And there's general concern around the lack of connectivity and costs associated with air travel back and forth. Southland, Invercargill in particular, has lost around 25,000 seats this last 12 months, so it's very significant, even though the growth in demand continues. And Te Anau Airport Manapuri investment strategy RFP is ready to go and will go live tomorrow, which is great. And that, what Mark didn't mention was those inbound tour operators actually flew into Te Anau. And the growth in landings in Te Anau Airport Manapuri is very significant year on year. So one of the biggest carriers have indicated continuation right through to 2027 and beyond, and that tends to be growing year on year, which is great. Just a quick touch on the energy. We're dictated by two areas of activity. One is our regional energy plan, which Council had contribution towards, and also a net zero Southland plan. They all come together. You can't have decarbonisation without alternative energy. As a region, we have to more than double our energy entering the market to meet our existing industry needs and our new industry investment, as well as electrification of transport. Pleased to know that we are the fastest growing region for solar in the South Island, and we have 385 new installations currently being installed. We had 216 registrations for our recent solar event, and that's we have another workshop out at Chris Stewart's farm at Isla Bank tomorrow, and we're taking some of the council team out to have a look at that, the use of PV for wastewater and water plants. We have 8 larger scale wind projects in the region. There's actually a few more than that at present, but 9 run-of-river hydro schemes that are currently being contemplated, not one locally and 2 in the Otago region, but nearby. We have now 70, soon to be 72 biomass boilers in the region, using 220,000 tonnes of waste wood. Demand will increase over the next 5 years to around 840,000 tonnes. And the good news is we're working through the process of establishing very large biomass processing plants for that, the first of which is underway or being established in the central Southland area. But we've looked at the Ojai Nightcaps area and the Matara area as well. We have biogenic methane. We talk about fuel shortage. The biggest fuel that we have available to us is biogenic methane. It's our largest emission, around 65% of our regional emissions. The smart operators in the region are using this biogenic methane to offset their fuel requirements for boilers and other uses. Hydrogen is still being investigated in the region as well. Just around wind resources, we've mapped the entire region as well as Fiordland for wind, and that's available online, including all the infrastructure type Tier 1, 2 and 3 power infrastructure, grid exit points, substations, and down to individual farms. So you can, or residents, you just put your address in here and you'll get all of the detail you need to make the first decision around that kind of investment. These are the current wind operations down here. Jericho, 335 megawatts. Taringatua, you've heard a little bit about recently, I imagine. 346 megawatts. 520 up to 520 megawatts, which is in this area here. And Slope down 300 up to 350 megawatts. And over on the Lock and Door range here, there's another 300 megawatts, but there's several others, 2 in the Invercargill city area and several other smaller scale wind operations. Just on the solar, again, every square metre of the region is mapped online, real-time, updatable. You can go and look at your residential or business or farm data to make the first decision around solar process. And we've connected all of the available resources in the region and national resources to help people to make those decisions, which is great. We're just at present being asked to look at you may or may not know, but we developed all the locations of charging stations when charging stations were first established in the region, and we're now being asked to look more extensively at additional charging stations throughout the region, including shortening of the distances from, say, Te Anau to Milford Sound and back, and we're looking at the entire area right the way through to Waitaki South, and we're being paid to do that work, but we've loaded all this information. We are going to work with Council on the exact position and location of these charging stations. At the end of the day, it'll be not our decision around that, but we're trying to put up the best possible case. We have already done some work in Mossburn. 2 weeks ago, I think the first charging station was established there, so that's an ongoing process. Just in terms of what does this actually mean as a region? Well, as a region, we're the only region to have reduced its overall regional emissions, and that's in this is our target to net zero, and this is the overall emissions reduction as a region. This is our biogenic methane reduction, soon to go further below the line as well. And this is our thermal and stationary energy reduction. So you can see that the 110 converted boilers, 4 more are under conversion at the moment. In Southland District, we're targeting 13 more boilers, primarily in schools, using this government's announced funding earlier in the week. So we're talking directly to the boards and to the government about that. And guess what? This has happened without social and economic shock. We are the fastest growing region in the country, and we have the biggest amount of forward investment targeted into the region. So you can achieve this. All of the operators, particularly the exporters, open themselves up to the highest value markets that are subject to climate-related disclosures. So we're in a really sound position in that respect. Always work has to improve. We just see the changes in stock numbers. We're up in beef. We're slightly down in dairy cows, which were up last year but down this year. And sheep, we're slightly better off, but we're still close to 700,000 fewer sheep. And fertiliser use has dropped off again. It did increase a little, but now it's dropping off, and that's a bit of a forward indicator of on-farm spend. So that's very useful. We're looking at, we've just finished today the peer review of our aquafeed production plant operations or suggestions for this region, and these are the crops that we're looking at, particularly focused in Southland, particularly focused in our heavier soil areas in northern Southland in particular, but not always. Some of these crops will be coastal sandy crops. But the aim is to augment our existing production systems using nitrogen-fixing crops and new crops for production of primarily a plant-based aquaculture feed system, which really, in the fullness of time, if aquaculture does develop, there's no good reason why we can't be producing the food for the fish, not only for Southland but for the entire New Zealand and beyond if needs be. The other area of focus for us has been, we've been asked by MB to develop a project for looking at deep aquifer systems. The original project was just through northern Southland and down the Matara Valley. Here we've mapped, we've digitised 496 boreholes and also mapped the groundwater in those areas using leapfrog modelling. But we want to be able to run the entire region with SkyTem. It's around an $8-9 million project, and to do most of the other regions in New Zealand, including Southland, will be about $80 million. So we think that before people start to look at water use, we've got to have a better understanding of where water is and what depth. This area here, we managed to get flown in 2021. That is actually just being analysed now, and that will be available for soon. But anyway, that's it from me. Hopefully, covers off sort of some of the key areas of focus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Worship, if there are questions, we're happy to take them.
I think you guys have got the record for the bytes of information per minute that were delivered in those presentations. I just got a quick question with Steve's one just being the last one. Just around some of that thing you touched on, like MB have asked to do that. So MB funding, like, because there's a lot of external funding for your work, isn't there? Like around the charger mapping. So a lot of that stuff is outside.
It's all external funding. Yep. Look, we struggle to make ends meet, so we've got to go after external work, and we have expertise in our team that satisfied not only the needs locally but possibly beyond local as well.
And then just a question around, because it's the schools that are getting those incentives at the moment. Because how many schools do we have left in Southland that are on diesel?
We have around 22, 13 of which are in Southland District.
So you've got the ready to go kind of packages?
Yeah, we've been running the database on that since 2015, so yeah, we're across that. Yep.
Probably got some other questions, but I'll open it up to the table. I imagine there's quite a few. Councillor Duffy, then Councillor Dobson.
Thank you. Just regarding the biomass, Steve, I see, I've understood it right, you predicted it going from 220,000 tonne to 840.
That's right.
Have we got the material to supply that?
Yeah, we have. We've mapped it out to the harvest profiles through to 2021, and we move up to about 1.3 million tonnes of residues, and also K-grade logs coming back into the fuels market. So K and KIS grade logs will flow back into this region. And we're already geared up. We'll have 72 biomass boilers already using that, and some of our large decarbonisation projects are looking at that. We also have a need for 95 of chemical grade carbon for carbothermic processes, and we're working with Rio Tinto to look at removing their heavy fuel oils and using biomass-based fuel for their carbon bake process. And yeah, so that's very positive. We have some exploded pellet inquiries out of Norway, and this is a biomass fuel that acts and functions the same as coals without the emissions, and we have quite significant interest in biochar for chemical and medicinal purposes. Yeah.
I see there's a wee spelling mistake in Head and Bush.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So.
You're on the news this morning about the project to take urea from lignite. Have you guys had involvement with that?
We are aware of the project. Yeah.
Thank
you. It's not a new process. It's
Councillor Dobson.
Yeah, are you able to talk about the biomass hub at Central Southland?
I can't talk about it in detail other than simply say that it will become public domain very shortly. The key thing about to Councillor Duffy's inquiry is that when you're moving from, when we started this game, we were around 20,000 tonnes of biomass available in the province, primarily for bedding for dairy industry. It's now 220,000 tonnes, so the step change is very significant. And when you're looking at energy, biomass is a very, very, very important part of our energy requirement. We talk about doubling the amount of electricity, or more than doubling. If we didn't have biomass and biogenic methane, we'd be looking at quadrupling the amount of fuel. The great thing about it is we anticipated this early, and so we've done the groundwork to achieve this. Yeah.
Cool.
Did you anticipate the Tapri house price increase early? And
Sorry? Sorry?
The Tapri house price increase over...
Yep, yeah, we did that. And that when we did the feasibility study for the bridge track, that was all clearly identified, yeah.
So interesting, just focusing on Bobby's presentation, and right at the start of the spatial planning we're doing, I said this is going to, the data that underpins this is going to be crucial to success, and the amount of data that's there. And it's quite interesting, like I wouldn't have picked some of the stuff that's coming through, but it's really useful to be able to underpin our work that we're doing with all of that real live data. Both Steve, Christine, you had your hand up.
Yes, just a comment, thinking about the earlier presentation, which I'm sure you have as well. This is the end of Q2 data that you're working on. So you're coming back to us with quarterly reports, I guess. Very informative and very useful, I think, for our planning ahead. There's likely to be a change in this quarter and next quarter. I guess my question is, given the earlier presentation, and even the data coming through at the end of the next quarter is going to be probably not detailed enough for us. Are we thinking perhaps we need to have that impact back earlier than waiting to the next quarterly report? What would your thoughts be around that, particularly around the KPIs and the work you're doing and thinking about the next financial year? Does that make sense?
Definitely, I think we need to. Presentation of the information, us coming and speaking to you, I think it has to be more regular, like a quicker turnaround rather than waiting for the quarter to end and then another quarter goes by before actually presenting that information. I think given what Nathan said before, and if the councils do consider having a regional sort of strategy on how to address the fuel prices, then we'd certainly like to be able to support you with the information that we hold, that we could also, interject so that you have the right information to make it happen. I know, though, it is also a very challenging time for councils, and you've got not only this, but so many other things that you've got to be talking about and deciding on. So we're open to come whenever you would like us to come, whenever you feel that you need information, whether it's just a specific topic and not everything, we can do that also. So just shout out and tell us what you need, and then we're more than happy to come through and support you with that.
I think with that regional piece, it's quite important. I think just acknowledging the work that's been done prior to the crisis with the biomass conversions, like we're probably ahead of the game a bit. And to my question earlier, like we've probably got the recipe to give to the schools that need to kind of get those last ones off the rank, but we're probably in a much better position having done those conversions earlier than we would have been now with that price of diesel. So
Correct. I think you're right, Mayor Rob, but I also feel like the investments are not going to be as forthcoming as we thought they would be, and that's where we're going to see that lag between what we have planned and what will actually happen, and what are we going to do in between to ensure that our communities are, still able to function as normally as possible. That probably is the biggest question right now.
I guess.
So I just don't let Viverti jump in and then
I was just going to say that I would suggest you take that as an open invitation of if you are seeing any trends or you think we need to be aware of this, feel free to reach out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
We'll definitely try and slot that in, and would be keen to hear
Great. Thank you. We will.
all right.
Yeah, 8 wind farms for Southland. How does that compare with the rest of the country? Is Southland an easy hit to put wind farms in? Is it the best place to put wind farms in, or?
Well, we're the only region, in fact, to have an energy strategy, we have since 2002. So we're on our 4th energy strategy, and all of this work is all part of the 17 documents that actually underpin that. So this enables decision makers to advance their projects with a great deal more certainty, because we also do the energy balance. So we do the calculation of energy need and the balance between new energy investment and energy demand. And the aim really is to try and keep them in balance. Yeah, or else we get energy spikes. We can't, as a region, do the heavy lifting for the entire area of New Zealand, but under what's known as the transmission pricing methodology, our exporters get a distinct advantage if the energy is generated locally and consumed locally, so you don't have to pay the costs of transmission, long lengths of transmission, and you don't sustain the losses on transmission, which are up to 20%. So there's a distinct commercial advantage, apart from the fact you're taking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of carbon out of the costs. So
I'd quite like to, in the very near future, actually do a workshop on, because it's so popular at the moment and there's so much activity going on and it's almost sort of happening in silos from our understanding. I'd quite like to spend a good chunk of time to get a really good understanding and grasp of the kind of wider impact of all of this different energy, all of the piece, and get an understanding of the energy strategy and how that actually fits in and maps out. So I was talking to the today about sliding that in sometime soon, because I think it would do us all good to get that wider understanding at the moment. We're getting questions. I'm getting a lot of questions from people that I can't answer as well, so I think it would be quite useful.
So just one point I didn't touch on, but it's now public domain. So last year we did an exercise using gamma ray analysis to identify phosphate deposits called the 4R project. The first deposit that we discovered has now gone to a commercial mining operation, and some of that phosphate is flowing into Southland. We've discovered 2 or 3 quite large deposits, and we've been asked to do the XRF and analysis for that development. That would be a domestic supply of phosphate potentially. We're not rich in phosphate as a country, so it's quite fortuitous for southern New Zealand that that opportunity is developed. So first mining operation is now fully commercialised here.
Councillor Buckroyd?
Thank you. This is for Steve, and I like somebody who actually thinks of biogenic methane at times as an advantage, as you just did, Steve, that we might be using it for energy. Now, my question is, for the country, for the last 2 decades, we've remained pretty much stable at domestic energy, overall energy, around 40,000 gigawatts hours, roughly. It's been a bit of a drop because of deindustrialization. Yeah. So many manufacturers are leaving now in droves because our pricing is too high. In Southland, where do you see most of this increased demand? Because you spoke about going up from 1,850 megawatts to 3,850 megawatts over the next 15 years. Where will this demand be coming from?
Yeah, well, we've broken it down into individual industries identified coming to the region, and I'm quite happy to provide it.
So you're saying there's not much domestic, it's all industrial, this demand that's coming?
No, I think domestic demand is growing because of electrification generally, but domestic demand is very sensitive, and so that's why we're seeing massive increase in the number of solar installations in the region, because if you look at ComCom have allowed EDBs to increase their line charges by 24% last year, 8% per annum for the next 3 years, and that's to satisfy the need to distribute more electricity throughout any given region. Transpower, likewise, their investment horizons have been typically 5 years. Are now 3 years. There's an instrument to allow them to consider betterment in that investment. So
you're saying this doubling of energy, a big chunk of it is domestic usage?
No. What I'm saying is domestic demand is growing very rapidly. No, industrial usage and electrification of transport.
So we are doing this in anticipation of electrification because
not only electrification, biomass also. Because I think Rob's idea of having a detailed discussion is probably worthwhile because what's happening is not only is there greater energy efficiency, so to your point, the actual demand overall is reasonably stable across the country. It doesn't mean that the electricity consumed has decreased. It just means that we've had a stable period, but now we're having a very significant growth period, and mainly driven by export markets. Export market demands through climate-related disclosures and also export markets driven through nature-related disclosures.
Good governance, and I see how Fonterra has tied itself up in knots there. But my question still remains is I see a lot of chatter online and even face-to-face with people who are seeing what is, and you might have seen our NZ articles, what is entities like DataGrid going to do to domestic power prices? Do you have any comment on those? Are people going to see, because you mentioned without economic shocks, but I think many of our constituents would beg to differ that they have seen that economic shock on their power bills.
Yeah,
so what do you think DataGrid is going to do to Southlanders' power bills?
Oh, look, I think industries like DataGrid and large electrification projects, for example, Fonterra is our largest point of emissions now. Tiwai is actually the second largest. Those kind of electrification in any of those industries will have a great deal of impact.
But DataGrid specifically, because that's in the works and it's touted as being
300 megawatts. It is highly impactful.
So it is going to impact individuals, even though?
No, it's not directly. The market is a national market, so demand at any given point doesn't affect local residents. It affects consumers across the country.
It impacts bills, everybody's bills.
Yes, but look,
I think this is probably a good discussion to have in that workshop. So we'll get to that low-level detail there rather than getting into it today. But I've asked Steve
the same question you asked ad nauseum.
So, yeah, I think it'd be really good to delve into that. Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Wilson, then we might have to look at them.
Through you, Worship. Fantastic opportunity, energy production, electricity production, renewable energy, using initiatives around that biochar space in terms of nitrogen fixation of crops to then feed our aquaculture industry. So it's all kind of a circular economy, understand that. I think it's great. Specifically looking at those areas where we're wanting to produce a lot of electricity to support our agricultural sector, which produces arguably a greater percentage of our GDP per capita. What initiatives are we taking in terms of supporting the agricultural infrastructure, like our, to be able to carry that production, that produce? Are we still looking at that space? I know we were looking there a few years ago, and it's kind of a bit of a grey area now. Are we looking in that space? And also, I know that the shipping industry is still a long way away from its electrification space, and we're looking at aquaculture obviously as an export in that area. Is there enough of an offset between our land-based agricultural production and our aqua production to be able to sort of say, well, we're doing this really, really well, but we haven't quite got it here based on our geography? Have you got any comments around that?
I think it's not one or the other. I think that land-based agriculture is critically important for Southland and still is the biggest contributor to our GDP and our exports. So I don't think that's going to change. Yes, greater use of soil data, greater use of geophysical data, greater use of understanding changes in climate and precipitation is very important. That's part of our ongoing activities. Yeah, critical. We're not talking about it today, but that's just business as usual. Effectively, only changes that is we're facing it in a fairly significantly changing weather environment. Yeah.
I think we're in a unique position to be able to create real opportunity in this space.
Absolutely, yeah. So that aqua feed is a classic example. Some of those crops that I didn't even list up there are crops that we routinely crop, and we hold the IP on some of the very good grains through the existing programs that are underway in the province. And so we've got a distinct advantage in that area.
So based on that, in terms of an IP perspective, then you can use that as a unique selling proposition to the end customer by saying, well, because we produce a higher grade product anyway, you're just kind of layering that for the use for the customer. Yeah. Right.
We have 110,000 hectares of very versatile soils that are ideally suited for these crops, particularly heavy, high-pugging index soils that are perfect for cropping.
Cool. I'll take the final question from Councillor Wilson, and then we'll need to carry this on.
Thanks. Another one for Steve. Regarding the net zero emissions targets, I think there was, and the no social impact. Where does carbon forestry kind of fit in the equation? Now, I know initially the numbers, there was like reducing herds, which we'll see more continued, but there was also a massive increase in carbon forestry. That doesn't appear to be part of the equation as much now. Where's that kind of happening?
It was around 8,900 hectares of new plantings in Southland, and we monitor that annually. We've set up a AI monitoring satellite spatial system that identifies a change, and we also identify landscape features like dimpling, where you spray, you can't see a tree, but you can see the dimpling in the landscape. That's a precursor to trees being developed, and other land creep analysis and various other things. So yeah, that's we monitor that, but the regulatory setting has changed, and the forward pricing's not so good. So yeah, it's not moving at the pace that we're concerned about.
So this probably won't contribute quite to that same level and target towards net.
Strange thing is that most of the carbon forests are being managed forests, so they end up being sawn for timber in the first rotation, and it comes into the mix, and we've taken that windfall spike into consideration in all of this work. Yeah.
And that supports the biofuel, I would imagine.
Yep. Wood chip through to other more complex bio outcomes.
The only other follow-up to that is just considering the kind of what was identified in the Beyond 2025 study with the risks around mentioning that kind of no social major impact, but the cost of that land conversion, is that still being monitored with that?
Yep, absolutely. No question about that. So that's an important consideration for this region, probably one of the more important considerations, as are the 700,000 fewer sheep. In terms of processing and production, it's a fine line, you know. Does that mean one plant is going to close down on the region? We don't know, but you've got to keep an eye on those indicators. And when we're talking about lag data, say that stock data just became available yesterday, so you're seeing it for the first time. Not all of the information is historic. It's
great that you've actually got it though, and able to present it. I think having that, being aware of what's kind of going on is crucial. So we appreciate that. And I think we could listen to each one of you by a day, but we're going to have to move this along. I just do want to also shout out to the MTFJ team as well. They're doing fantastic work, so just pass on my thanks to them.
Thank you. We appreciated the time. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, I'm going to shuffle the agenda around a little bit now. Just we've got conference with some of our. So I'm going to jump to. I see Sam and Stella are available, so I'm going to go right up to 8.5, I think, on page emergency. So this is a.
Oh, we've got to do the
Second the.
Oh, sorry. I will move from the chair that we received that information from Prince House. Councillor Menzies is happy to second that. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Carried.
What was that page number, Rob?
111. So this is for the Monkey Island shelter. It's been a very cool project to follow over the last 12 months, and I'll hand over to Sam and Stella.
Your Worship, I'll just make some brief comments and hand over to Stella to take us through the report. As Mayor Rob said, there's been a period of time. We presented an initial proposal for the upgrade of the area, including the shelter. We had feedback from council that you'd like us to revise that. So we've been away as a team working with the community over the last 12 months or more. And today is a fairly significant point, focused primarily around the shelter itself in terms of the proposals that we've developed with Phil Orr, who's a local architect, and Phil gives his apology today. If there's particularly technical questions, he can't be here due to a bereavement, but he's been a key part of developing this proposal for you. So with that, I'll hand over to Stella to take us through the report.
Sam, and good morning everyone. So today we're asking Council to consider approving this revised proposal to repair and refurbish the Monkey Island shelter rather than rebuild, as this option is more cost effective and better aligned with the intended community use. So as Sam mentioned, we were asked to go back and re-engage with local community in iwi before progressing the original option. And that engagement's happened and has included surveys and face-to-face local on-site meetings, including community board meetings as well. So the feedback really confirmed that the shelter is really highly valued by the community, and there's a real strong desire to retain it and repair it. So you'll see there's no option there in the report to demolish it or to not refurbish it. So the cost, most of the cost related to the repair, it actually is down to the full replacement of the roof. It's a complete replacement, and that's required. It's engineered to provide that earthquake strengthening for the entire building. And that is because that's mandatory for any building that's accessible to the public. So it's a public building, we've got people under that roof. So that would be required for a rebuild as well. So as Sam said, Phil Orr has been advising us. He's a local architect, so he's provided the technical drawings and prepared the cost estimate, which is an estimate at this stage until the project progresses to tender. And through those community engagement, there's been a lot of local interest about locals coming on board and actually doing the project as well. So we'll make sure if it goes to, it's approved today, that we try and get it out to locals to be part of the tendering. And as part of that procurement process, we propose that we structure the tender to allow community involvement where it's feasible. So we've talked about that with the community. They want to be involved if it's feasible. It might be painting the shelter, or it might be helping to get rid of some of the scrap. So the proposal also includes a few optional extras if the costs are looking to skyrocket or get out of hand, or if the community decides they don't want it at all, and it's things like the tank and the solar pump, and you'll see them in the pictures there that the architect's provided a couple of photos. I think they're AI generated, but it looks like a shower, but it's actually a foot wash, so it wouldn't be so tall. So that was something that the community thought could be quite nice, but then it's not necessary either. And we have already presented this report to the community board, the revised proposal at their meeting on the 14th of April, and they've recommended that report. And as part of that, they actually have delegated already the chair and the deputy chair to make any further recommendations on the scope of budget changes. So Sam's just mentioned to me that we may not need that Resolution E. Have you got anything else to add, Sam?
I would say there was 2 public meetings we held, at least, at Ngārapuki.
Yeah, two full public meetings, but there was a few on-site ones with some locals as well.
I mean, in addition to the on-site meetings, we had the 2 well-attended, I would say, public meetings, and when we presented with Phil Orr and the board these revised plans, I think it's fair to say there was strong support, some clapping in the public meeting. In terms of, I think it's safe to say there's very strong support in that community for the plan that's being developed here for the refurbishment. You'll also see Quila-like decking go around as seating inside. Stella's outlined a couple of other aspects of it, but there'll be an epoxy floor surface, so that'll lift it quite significantly as well. We've staged the project, so this is to sort out the future for the shelter. If you approve this, we would be lodging a building consent as our next stage, then going to tender and trying to get construction done by the end of the year.
I think this is an outstanding result, and I think getting a round of applause at a community meeting is pretty impressive for a council. It doesn't happen often, but I think it actually signals where this has landed. And I was gutted I missed that meeting, but I was certainly at the first one, and they were strongly attended, strongly engaged, and I just want to acknowledge the work of the staff as well, who have actually, in my view, done this the right way, and we've landed with a really good result. And I know the board's ecstatic with this as well, so thank you. It's an outcome. Are there any questions from the...
It's probably not the times to be coming up with something else, but I just wonder, like Doc did a shelter building at Waipapa years ago, and they put some interpretation inside on the lighthouse keepers, etc. And I'm sure Monkey Island's got some great stories to tell. I'm just wondering if that could be something that could be looked at some point. There's more money around.
We have talked to the community about if they would like information panels on the inside, and the architect said that could be done at a later stage, even like if we even call it the Monkey Island, they actually call it Pavilion. They refer to it as Pavilion, Monkey Island Pavilion on the outside as well. We've had, talking to Muriel, she's happy with the sign that's there at the moment about Monkey Island, and there's a small little piece there, the iwi sign.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just regarding paragraph 7, does that application to Heritage New Zealand need to be done at this point or further down the line?
Because it's a repair, we don't have to do that at all. So that was originally required
for the dismantle.
For the rebuild, because the rebuild was actually going to put it in a slightly different place, and so we were disturbing the earth.
Yeah. Does the existing application need to be closed off or anything, or do we just don't need to worry about that?
It was closed off because it expired.
Apologies for that. It's a bit of context from previous reports.
Yeah.
So don't need to worry about it.
No, so this approach actually avoids the need for it entirely.
But if we did have to, if we were rebuilding, we would have to reapply.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
Councillor East.
Thank you. I note under the financial considerations, number 29, that the project's funded by loans and it's repaid by the district rate, the general rate. Why is it a district rate?
This is one of the 8 district reserves across the whole district, so that's why it's a district funded.
I thought that was probably what it was, but
Yeah, apologies, we probably should have mentioned that as well, but
so it will be as part of the reserve management plan, so this will be coming.
Yes, so Monkey Island is part of the wider reserve management plan as well, yes.
I think from my point of view, just reflecting on that, good question, Councillor, is the differentiation between district and local. This highlights the importance of, even though it's district funded, including the locals in the mix and not making the decisions around this table. I think it's a prime example. Sorry, I saw a hand up over on this side. Councillor Menzies.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment which has already been made to thank and acknowledge the work that's been done by the local community in coming up with this AI-generated image is what we're looking at, but presumably quite close to it. I think it looks great in the landscape. It's going to be placed excellent outcome. Thank the staff for the work.
If I may, Mayor Rob just mentioned too, like page 127 onwards, so there's a concept there to give you a feel of what the refurbished shelter will look like. I should probably mention that there was fairly significant upgrades, new lintels across the front of the building and the rear as well, and as Stella's mentioned, the whole roof with, in simple terms, 5-rib corrugated iron on top of it and ply underneath creates that strengthening of the structure as well. So I think we believe it's a good balanced approach that creates the structural strength we're looking for, but also the functional usability of it will improve as well.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor O'Brien.
Through you, Your Worship, just sharing the sentiments, general sentiment around the table, around the process, and it looks like it's going to be a really good, positive outcome. Do you still have to apply for a resource consent to go through with this process? A building consent. That's right. I just want clarification around that.
Cool. Well, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, yeah, just another question. What's in behind the doors at the back?
Little changing sheds.
Oh, right.
Changing rooms. Yeah.
So even though it's in a fairly degraded condition at the moment out on site there, we're still seeing, like last summer, people going in and using those to change, and so we'll have doors on there for privacy replaced, and the foot wash will give the opportunity to wash off sand when the people come up off the beach as well to use it. We would flag there that we don't have a reticulated water supply out there, so it'll be a limited supply of water for things like foot washes. So it's not an unlimited supply, and we'll be marking it clearly that it's not drinking water either.
So the previous new build design probably didn't meet the community's desires around it being able to be used as it's been used now, in that it didn't actually have specific changing area. It's more sort of a drop-off spot for visitors to sit and look at some information.
Cool. So we've got our recommendations here, and I'm actually going to suggest that we keep E in there, but just make an amendment to say delegates the Tuatapere Te Waiwai Community Board Chair and Deputy Chair, just to basically endorse that from a council point of view, in case anything does need to be made, so that basically, if the table's comfortable, obviously, but that's my suggestion that we put in there.
Mayor Rob, so just that's good. Would that also mean that you are comfortable as council delegating, if we've got, say, minor changes in budget and scope, if we need to go back to a governance body, you're comfortable that we do that through the chair and deputy of the board?
If the table is, I certainly am.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not seeing one. Yeah, cool.
Project progressing.
Yeah, so through you again, we just probably need to amend that last little bit of that resolution, so it's a bit broader, because you're the governance body for this district reserve.
Yeah.
Something to effectively say that you're delegating authority to those two elected members for those decisions.
Yeah. So delegates authority for
Chair. Chair and Deputy Chair of the Tuatapere Te Waiwai Community Board, make any further changes on scope or budget associated with the Monkey Island Shelter project.
Changes rather than recommendations.
Yeah.
Cool. So, and then D above that, we're approving the proposal for the Monkey Island Charter refurbishment scope and associated indicative estimate of 112k, noting the exclusion of the internal and external plastering, and the other three are just our standard. Do we have someone in a position to move A through to E? Yep. Councillor Wooston, seconded by Councillor Bokarai. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Sam. Okay, I am going to move the agenda around even more now, because we've got a very patient community board chair sitting there, so I might jump over to the Mayor's report now as well. I know Dave and Adrian are really enjoying this meeting, so they don't mind waiting a bit longer. So this is on page 19 of our agenda. This is obviously the Mayor's report, so I will talk to it. And I'll just touch on a couple of things from my point of view. You'll see a list of all the engagements here, and I'll also hand over to some councillors to talk to anything that they've been interested in, they've been active in. I caught up with Minister Watts in Toronto a couple of weeks ago and showed him around the wastewater plant there, and then explained how the new standards that came out in December don't apply to the majority of our wastewater plants, and had a very good discussion with him there, and he had a couple of officials with him, and that resulted in both Te Mata Arawa and DIA coming down the next week to engage with the staff. You'll know that we've been working with them the whole way through, and like we've used the likes of Balfour as a pilot, and so that work is now continuing based on those standards. So I was impressed with the interaction with the team. They came down quickly, responded quickly, and they're working really well with our team around making sure that those standards are fit for purpose for the Southland kind of mode. So that was quite a good catch up. The other piece, Minister Simmons, while she was Minister of the Environment, that's now changed, but we managed to get through that legislation change for the glass separation for the recycling. So at a point in time, that was going to have to be connected at the curb, and so there's been a change indicated in there, and so that's going to be quite helpful as well. And I'm acutely aware that the far rate and NLTP results, for want of a better word, are going to come out at the end, about August this year. So I'm trying to get in front of the NZTA board to have another crack around, and I quite like Phil's suggestion earlier on around that DST piece, but I do want to make sure that we front foot that, so we're not challenging a decision that's already been made, but want to sort of get in there and highlight the fact that we are definitely an outlier in terms of that national picture. And there's the two streams that we really need out of that National Land Transport Fund, being able to actually get our program that we want to do done, but then also having that far rate at the level that enables us to afford to do that important road funding. So I'm going to keep that piece up as well. And if there's any questions for anything on my list, I'll welcome them. But Councillor Menzies.
I just note the extensive travel you were doing in communicating and linking in with our local communities. I'm aware of the current fuel crisis, and I'm also aware of you just travelling in and out each day to the office and completing 10 or at least 12-hour days often. But just related to your vehicle, which is a plug-in hybrid, and so your fuel consumption is quite high, and I wondered, and I don't know if there's any process around this and whether it can occur for you to have the ability to charge your vehicle at home and the council support the cost of putting a charger in, which I think for my circumstances was about $1,300. I don't know what the costs are now, to lower the cost of fuel on an ongoing basis. Whether or not it comes down or not, it won't come down probably as far as it is now. But are we aware of what the process around that would be?
I'm looking at the acting.
We can definitely take that away and look into that question.
Yes, just well, that's my personal thought. I don't know whether as councillors that would be endorsed or not, rather than as a personal cost for the mayor, that becomes a council cost to allow the charging to happen at night, and then there's a charging again because the council has a facility at 4th Street, I presume.
No, at Don Street.
Yes, which would lessen the reliance on diesel or petrol.
Yeah, petrol. But yeah, the accountant and me did do a little bit of work on this when this fuel crisis hit, and I did a bit of, because I can charge I can't charge the car at home at the moment easily because it takes too long and it doesn't really work with the normal plug. But using the ChargeNet charger
I can get about 1.2 litres per 100 k's if I was to charge it at both ends. So it's a significant improvement in the cost, and I'm probably using a reasonable amount of fuel every month, so that it would pay for itself pretty quick. In terms of cool.
It's a good idea. I think it's a wider conversation too, though, of considering everything going on. I mean, we should be, at COVID times, council was forced to take meetings online. So obviously you're back daily, back and forth. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't think twice about, should I drive down for today's meeting and do 2 hours return driving, or is it more practical to be attending these meetings online, considering everything that's going on? I think we probably just have to have a conversation as an organisation we adapt, considering everything we've heard today, but also just the realities of doing stuff now. But yeah, you're travelling a lot.
I was impressed at our meeting in Te Anau that I think there was 4 vehicles for councillors and staff combined. So I think we are already being relatively efficient. And I take your point, but also I think that face-to-face is also equally important. So I struggled in COVID time with the online meetings all the time. But yeah, definitely worth having.
And that's just a cost to bear, because mileage reimbursements would not be covering fuel costs at the moment. It's just a cost that we take as part of our role currently.
Are there any other questions for?
No.
Are there any councillors that wanted to give an update on anything that they've been involved in? Sorry, Councillor Duffy.
Well, I just feel like perhaps might mention Rob couldn't make it, so I went to a foot and mouth workshop in.
I already had my foot in my mouth.
That's probably why you chose me to go in the place. But EPI ran it, and it was quite a good representation there. There was 2 council people, myself and Dave Burgess from ES, and there was people from like vets, dairy companies, transport, so and of course farming, quite a wide spread of the potential involved parties if there was an outbreak. And it's just, I think it does us all good to just see the reality of what a foot and mouth outbreak could result in terms of our economy and our people's well-being, seeing their animals killed and all the rest of it, and just how there are really no shortcuts. I mean, it's easy when you don't know to say, oh, well, why don't we just vaccinate and it'll be fine? But actually that doesn't work like that either. And I think New Zealand's got a great opportunity. The fact we've got 2 islands, that we could at least confine it to 1 if we're serious about it. And but I have a feeling that I think there was much more awareness about foot and mouth back in the 70s when Britain were having their outbreaks and it was on our TV screens. And I think perhaps even among people like us, that awareness has sort of dropped off a bit, and there's need for vigilance, particularly at the border, but also just in our thinking about what we do when we go overseas. I was in China where there was foot and mouth, for instance, and I did wonder about tourists who might have been there and were coming to New Zealand. They could have been on a farm in the Waikato within 24 hours, sort of thing. So yes, it's something to be highly aware of, and the implications of it would be massive and set us back as an economy for a number of years, assuming we got out of it. So it was a valuable day, I thought.
Thanks, Paul. I did have a message from Councillor Graney that the connected Mitahiku is now officially wound up, so we can probably remove that from the list going forward. There was a paper added to the hub from the regional climate change area. I don't know if Matt or Michael want to talk to that at all, or if we just take that as read.
Yeah, the group's only just met, really starting for the triennium. Some of the order of business for the next meeting in a couple of weeks is just addressing terms of reference, updating, checking it for purpose for the triennium. But probably the key of it is Earth Science and ES have released the impact assessment report for Southland, and at a glance, annual rainfall increase of 5% by 2050. Annual flows projected to increase by 9% by 2090. annual, I could list the whole thing off. There's an at-a-glance list with those key impacts that I think it's a science that needs to back up anything. I guess the key is now how these predictions and forecasts then apply to things like our asset activity management plans into the LTP to check that none of this creates vulnerabilities for any of our assets or plannings or things like that. But this will be, I guess, discussed in detail at the next meeting, and ensuring that it flows into understanding what local government needs to do about it. Michael's got.
Yeah, right. I'll let Michael jump in first, and then.
I'd agree with Matt's comment. Like, it's early days. The big one that I think needs to be followed through is just our river maintenance, because that's the risk for all of Southland, and it's almost the elephant in the room in terms of what we're going to do to mitigate the stuff and revisit gravel mining from riverbeds, etc., regular checking, all those sort of things that we could easily put in place. These one-off events like Wellington's just seen don't need to be have the bad outcomes that they have if we're proactive in managing and being sensible about good strategies. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm sure Matt and the nods in the room. So
yeah, no, I think
my comment.
I think the room and the Collective 69 room would agree that that's a priority for that group to be focusing on as a region, because it's got a regional impact. So that's good to hear. Thank you. Sorry.
Ironically, just moving on from what Matt and Michael have just said, and the joint subcommittee meeting with Emergency Management Southland on the 19th of February, do we have a provisional plan in place to be able to take those workshop learnings to community boards?
The emergency management piece is still a kind of a work in progress in terms of that. As you'll know, we put a motion requesting, sorry, I should actually talk about that, put a motion requesting a in-depth review into emergency management. That didn't pass the first hurdle. Anyone that knows me knows that can be a little bit stubborn at times, and so I'm still actively working on that one to make sure that we get a good outcome, particularly around our community boards. And there's a really strong interest in all of our boards around. We don't need to ask them to take ownership; they already have taken ownership, and I think that piece is actually just enabling that to actually work. And irrespective of where EMS lands, I think as an organisation we'll be doing some work to ensure that we're prepared, because as Wellington just found out, it doesn't take any notice before something else hits. So yeah, it's a very active piece of work. That thank you for raising that. Just one, sorry.
Just a question following up on what I talked about before. I just wondered, out of that, would we have the legal ability to close a particular road if there was an outbreak that would be better to keep the public away from?
I'm looking to my left.
If it's a declared emergency, we can close roads and.
Thank you.
And just one final piece that I'd missed that I'd actually written down was for WasteNet, we did a field trip out to AB Lime, and I think we should as a council all go out there. That was a great day. They run a really good operation there, and seeing a Class 1 landfill, and we got to see the new power plant that they've got there as well. So they, was it 100 megawatts, wasn't it? No, 1 megawatt. Yeah, 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
Capability of, so that's the methane that they capture from the landfill. And then they can then put that out to the grid.
Just reminded me of part of the community liaison group with AB Line. And one of the things that came from, if I remember correctly, from the storms in October is that they've got a great big generator there, and there was, like, they reached out to EMS, but they basically, they could power winter essentially with the size of it, but also with all of the power station and stuff like that. Now it's something that they were quite interested in pursuing further.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to look over to our board. This is my favourite part of our council meetings, having these updates from our board chairs, and we have the. I'll do that at the end. We've got the wonderful Diane from the Fiordland Community Board coming to speak to us. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming all the way into the Capital.
That's right, I was actually here anyway. I had surgery yesterday, so if I'm impaired by general anaesthetic recovery, I apologise. I could make it more fun though. Righty-ho. So thank you very much, Mayor Rob and councillors, for giving me the opportunity to come and speak today. It's always nice to be invited and have a captive audience. So Fiordland. Fiordland, in a nutshell, has been busy. Really, really busy. We've been busy bucking economic trends for now. Busy with even more new housing developments, record population growth. I don't know if many of you saw the article in the New Zealand Herald recently, so outstripping the average New Zealand population growth over the last 15, 20 years, but mostly in the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Even industrial growth, we've got a big new Fiordland hire centre in the middle of our new industrial development, and a new venison processing works is in the pipeline. So there's an awful lot happening in Fiordland. Although admittedly it's anybody's guess what next season will look like. I was listening to the Great South team. We've also got really good numbers of bookings with our accommodation providers and with our tourist operators over the what's normally our shoulder season and winter season, but anybody's guess what's going to happen in the next summer. Because of course all these things that are happening over winter and autumn and spring are already booked. So the Community Board's headline activities have been mostly around our outdoor spaces. We're certainly doing our bit to keep the reserves and project teams very, very busy. I'll start with the floating sauna, why not? And Ivan Wilson on Lake Henry. It's probably still fresh in your minds with the round of recent submissions. For my part, I think the process has been really robust, and it was great to see that the public submitters had all of the information that had been gathered as part of the RMA process available to educate themselves with prior to going to the public submission part of the process. And I wish you all the very best in your consideration and combined wisdom in working through that decision. Lakefront project. Te Anau Lakefront has started to look neglected. If you've been there recently, the gums were cut down, a number of the gum trees were cut down due to safety issues. Stumps have been left in situ. We've got eroding banks, weeds and blackberry that's flourishing on a diet of goose poo. So not really the image that we want to project to our visitors or to our community. So we've had 2 public surveys undertaken so far. Using the remaining budget we were gifted from Milford Opportunity Stage 2 project for implementing the Te Anau Basin Development Plan, the board's received some draft theme designs put together by Garth Falconer from Redbank. We've approved him to go on to drafting a detailed plan now. He's in Te Anau today and tomorrow, consulting with stakeholders on some of that stuff. We'll then go public once again for more input on the proposed draft design once we've seen it. So we're trying to take very much a public consultation approach because it's really important. This is our lakefront, it's our future, it's a huge piece of work and it needs to be delivered with a lot of public scrutiny on it. From the public surveys, it was very clear that the community wants good value for their ratepayer dollars, doesn't want us running up unnecessary costs on nice-to-haves right now. And that makes sense with everything going on in the economy, global and national. With a budget of only $1.2 million over 3 years, it really doesn't go very far these days. Focus will be on retaining areas where slippage is occurring, tidying up low maintenance gardens, as well as rubbish bin and seat renewal or replacement. Bigger wish list items from the community are a widened multi-use path and a jetty for the public boat ramp, the latter having its own budget line in the LTP for 2028. One of the most overwhelmingly requested items from both surveys is a toilet on Steamers Beach, which sees hundreds of people using it on any given warm day in summer. We know that toilets are district-funded assets, and there have been discussions, albeit brief, in the community board about whether the Ivan Wilson toilet upgrade might be sufficient to provide toilets for the area if moved closer to the road. It's going to be contentious no matter what happens. Anyway, that's a heads-up matter that this will likely cross your tables and your paths in the next few months as well. Water park consultation. So I don't know if many of you know what we call the water park. No. Okay, so at the entrance of Te Anau, you come in and you've got the turn left to go down to the lake area. So on that left-hand turn directly in front of you, there's a large forest area that are full of Douglas firs and spring-fed water that comes through the park and pools in various places within the park, hence it's called the water park. When I first moved to Te Anau, I was very excited when I saw the sign water park. I was looking for Splash Planet. But anyway, we have a very nice park that does not have one slide in it, nor should it. Anyway, water park. The board received requests from park neighbours who felt that the Douglas fir trees were becoming dangerous. They'd found some fallen limbs. We had an arborist report that showed that they're currently in reasonable health, but are within the optimum time frame for harvesting. Some are showing signs of a mite, like they're dying from the top down, but still currently okay. With all of this in mind, the Fiordland Community Board thought it might be a good time to ask the public what they thought about the future of the water park as well. And that if we were able to get money for the logging of the timber, that might assist with paying for the project. And so it might be a good time to strike with a project to future-proof the park. A survey's gone out requesting feedback about the water park. That report's been put together and will be at our meeting on Tuesday. Monday's Anzac Day. Anyway, you know what I mean. Tuesday. So that's something sort of interesting for us to be looking at, whether the development will be done or not in that area, but we'll see what happens. Lakeside Labourers. The Lakeside Labourers are a new group who have taken up the clean-up of the lakefront on the western side of town, from the rodeo grounds to the Matariki Po. They have an MOU with council and have been quietly getting on with coordinating weed control, mowing, pest control, small tree management, and are soon to look at how they can get some picnic areas and low-lying, low-maintenance gardens established. They're volunteers who live in the area who just saw that that part of the lakefront needs to be better utilised and tidier, as so many people are now using the road to visit the Matariki Po. And we're really, really lucky to have volunteers of that calibre in our community. In Manapōuri, the SDC has been working with other relevant agencies to get consent granted to install a floating pontoon on Fraser's Beach, which will be a great feature and provide a safe swimming space at the lakefront. The idea was presented to the board a couple of years ago by the recently passed Irene Barnes, a great final tribute to an amazing civic-minded lady who continues to contribute to her community even in her passing. The bird park, more parks. Told you it's all about the outdoors with us. You may have seen news that two prominent businessmen, directors of Cruise Milford, have teamed up with Te Uraka Rema Runanga to advance and improve the Te Anau Bird Park, Punanga o Manu. The Fiordland Community Board has participated in stakeholder forums to this point. We hope there continues to be a place for the Community Board to feed into that process. It's looking like that park will have an exciting and positive future ahead of it. Great South's Bobby Brown has been instrumental in pulling all of the stakeholders and partners together to advance the process to this stage. She has done an absolutely incredible job. Spatial planning. We're just starting on our journey with the spatial planning, but with the amount of growth that Te Anau is seeing, it's absolutely essential work to ensure it's sustainable. We're very appreciative that SDC has initiated and is prioritising this planning. housing. I think last time I was here, I was talking about how we were having something of a housing rental crisis. It's not been the case over the season. We've had a combination of factors that have relieved the pressure, including a large older hotel that has transitioned into long-term stays, which suits seasonal staff. More people appear to have been taking in private boarders to help pay the bills in the cost of living crisis. And a number of employers and investors have purchased houses for their own staff to live in. You probably know I'm working for PGG Rights, and now our rental property manager has said that, and you can see from the listings that there are rentals that have been sitting there for several weeks at a time throughout the year, waiting to be filled rather than having a waiting list of people. So that has changed for now, but with housing things can be quite unpredictable. Emergency management. Ollie from EMS has been working with my Deputy Chair, Julie Burgess, on the Manapori community on their emergency management plan. Julie is very happy with the level of communication and progress that's being made on their plan. He's had one meeting with me last week, and Tiana's plan will start being explored and updated. He's been working in the background with individual stakeholders and community partners, but he will cohesively start looking to bring us all together in August. He's looking at a broad range of community groups, businesses and individuals in the development of the new plan, and then a subsequent scenario training and testing, and I'm just hoping that Mother Nature will hold fire until August, and we won't get any of those red warnings until we're ready. I think that's about it for me. That's enough. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak today, Mayor Rob.
Thank you. And can you just ask Mother Nature to leave it a bit longer than August as well?
Yeah. Yes, August, some year. Yeah.
Thank you, Diane. It was I always enjoy your presentations, and yeah, that was another great one. You keep lifting the bar, but fantastic. And I just want to acknowledge yourself and your board, and also Irene's family as well. That was she was certainly a stalwart of that community, and
absolutely.
I know that she will continue to provide the great service that she's been doing.
Yeah, we want a big Irene for the pontoon.
Yeah. Are there any questions
through you, Rob?
Yeah,
great report. When you talk about the water park and the removal of the trees, is there a plan after that? Because what I was thinking is that you also have your volunteer group who did the clean-up down at the waterway and maybe do some plantings. Is there some sort of plan for that?
That's what we're surveying on, is what would people want it to look like, because we don't want to do the tree removal without having the remediation plan to go hand in hand to the public with, because nobody wants to see a bunch of tree stumps.
That's what I'm thinking.
Without a plan. So that's why we've asked, to reimagine.
And can you help me visualise the size of it and the topography? Is it a flat area?
No, it's definitely not a flat area. It's a sloped area on the way into town. So you drive down that, you come into town, you drive down the lakefront, and it's that entire area from the main road down to the lakefront. We have a lot of people walk down that way. There's no footpath. There's no path through it. There's just some general things that could be done. And we'll just see with the results of the survey what we might do, where we might go next with it. Yep.
Exciting, good.
Potentially.
I just wonder, is it in order to ask about the community board and the letter of support for the sauna, or is it not?
Might leave that one until after we finish the deliberation.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. Yeah.
Cool. Well, if there's nothing further for Diane, I'll thank you very much for coming along. And we do have, for those that have read the report, which I hope you review, a recommendation on the agenda around the heritage review as well. So that's around that heritage services review that we're, looking at having undertaken by June, and due to various reasons, mainly time constraints, it's been looked at to carry out the review properly. We just want to extend that out to the 10th of October, which isn't going to have any detrimental effects at all, but we just need to amend that resolution because obviously that was made for the end of June. So I've just got
an update there on that last page of the report. Are there any questions around that at all? Cool. Anything you want to add to that? Cool. And I'm just wondering if Councillor Menzies, if you would like to add a resolution around, I've just noted down here, investigate EV charging for the Mayor given the rise in fuel costs, something to that tune. So add in that C. So we've got A, noting the information contained in the report, and thanking Diane, who's unfortunately left before I could thank her properly, but for coming along, and we're altering that resolution from the 25th of November. And then C, investigate EV charging for Mayor given the rise in fuel costs. Is someone in a position to move A through C? Councillor vote for aye, seconded by Councillor Menzies. Any further discussion?
Well, I just wonder, is it worth widening that out a wee bit? I mean, the future probably is going to be much more EV councillors as well. And I can't remember what they are, but there's different rates, I think, depending on the type of vehicle. And just make sure we're not,
not just
disadvantaging people.
Yeah. So investigate EV charging for elected members rather than Mayor. And then
No, well, certainly Mayor, but as well as.
Sorry, Councillor Menzies?
So I'm just wondering why we'd be investigating EV charging for elected members, given there is a
there's already reimbursement. Yeah.
reimbursement rate.
I had similar reservations, plus the fact that elected members are not having the same regular commute that you are as mayor.
Yeah.
That is probably.
I totally agree with all that, but I just wonder, given the future that we're likely to have.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. There's no further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. And related thanks to Diane as well. Okay. How are we looking? 12 o'clock. I might move over to the dog one now with Dave and Adrian patiently waiting. Dog registration fees 26, 27 on page 11. Thank you, Dave. Sorry to keep you waiting.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon now, sorry. For the Chair, I'll take the report as read. The only extra thing I'd like to add is that we now have 100% of our known dogs registered.
Known dogs?
First time. Very long, a very, very long time.
Quite an achievement.
Questions at all?
I've got some questions from Sarah, but just while I find them, I'll just open up the table if there's any questions. Councillor Keast?
Thank you. Thanks for your report, Dave, and well done on getting all the known dogs registered. Do you believe that you will have find the same problem again this next year getting them, or is this push something that will set us up for the future for
I think this will,
payment?
through the Chair, I think this will set us up for the future good. We've always known we'd have a couple of years of pain getting to this point. The team's worked extremely hard and getting them, and we've used even budgeting services to help some of our ratepayers be able to afford to use to pay their registration. As you're aware, our registration fees are some of the lowest in New Zealand, if not the lowest. So we do make it very, very affordable for everybody. And we also make the not so good owners pay their own way to offset, so the good owners aren't paying for the bad ones.
Any other questions? So just around that paying, sorry, this is a Councillor Granny question, so I'm just reading on my phone. When the account of funding from rates was introduced and as 6% of revenue to acknowledge the public good of animal control. So do we look at this being completely user pays in terms of the ratepayers actually contributing to this? I think given the instructions coming from Wellington as well around and more of a focus on user pays, is that a shift that is worth exploring, do you think? Or?
I'll leave that to Adrian to answer that one.
Mr Chairman, councillors, we do take 6% of our costs from rates. the average in the country is at least 10%. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, if you indulge me, I'll do a little step back on the history of Southland dog control. Up until about 10 years ago, it was accepted that everybody would be honest and register their dogs. And obviously some people aren't and lots of people didn't. And because of this, we never really had a serious dog registration scheme. I think it was $10 for a dog in Southland not too long ago. When I came here 2.5 years ago, dog control was not in a good way. We had a lot of unregistered dogs. We had a lot of people working very hard trying to get the dogs registered. I think the 6% of rates is the lowest I've ever come across. My last council was 10. One before that was 15 for a while. We got that down to 10. You're always going to have some public good from dog control. And I think it's not just dogs, it's also animal control. So stock on roads, that sort of thing. So we don't charge people for a stock on roads fee, if you like. So that would be, you could recognise that 6% go into this animal control purely for the stock on roads that we control. We do bill people if we know whose stock it is, but more often than not, we just stick the animals back in a paddock and hope the owners find it the next day, because that's all we can do. So I think 6% is reasonable. I think the dog control pays for itself well now. So I think 6% is reasonable. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. I actually had forgotten that I had the same kind of comment as what Councillor Graney has made, and when you've broadened it out from dogs, but I do wonder if I'm in a position to be able to afford it. You know, do we would decide either to lower that or to do away with the contribution from the ratepayer?
I suppose for you, Mr. Chair, the question is then how do we pay for the animal control element? I think it's, with respect to Deputy Mayor, it's very important that we get stock animals off roads if they're on there. And the reality of trying to track down Elm at 3 o'clock in the morning on the Lumsden Highway is that we're just going to make it safe. We will try and track it down. If we do find the owner, we can then charge a fee per head. But I doubt that that insecurity of funding would enable us to provide that service. Equally, do you as a member of the public, I don't own a dog, but do you begrudge a very small amount of money a year going towards keeping you and your children safe from dogs? You know, it is the responsibility of the owner, and we do enforce that. As you can see, this year we've hammered registrations. Hopefully, as has been indicated, it will be less next year. People will have learned a lesson that we will find them, and we will find them if we find them. One of the amazing things, when we were checking up on unregistered dogs, we found an awful lot more unregistered dogs. So this is shown to us that there's real value in going out and visiting properties. Yeah. I mean, again, if we were to take the rates support out, that's a decision for council. We just have to see how we're going to fund it.
Thank you. I think it helps to identify the wider animal control responsibilities, whereas the dog control is paying for itself basically through the fees and other associated processes where registration is not paid.
Yeah, I remember when I came down from Wellington and got dogs for the first time. Is that for a whole year, or was it just a week?
In regards to the stock control, particularly cattle, do we as a council have access to the NATE Osprey database for ear tags?
No, we don't.
I know that when you're getting animals off the road, if you're getting cattle off the road in the middle of the night, you're not going to necessarily be shining a torch trying to read what's on a tag. But those tags, well, you've got your scanner ones, but you've also just got the code and the number, which I'm just wondering if that's
one of the for you, Mr. Chair. We don't have direct access to it. However, if we request access to it through the various providers, they will normally provide it. One of the biggest problems I've had, and this wasn't at this council, it was at another council, we found 30-odd cattle beasts eating someone's garden, as in Toonwold at Ashburn actually, we found that they'd gone 15 miles overnight, which isn't unusual for cattle apparently. But the tags they had on their ears had changed ownership 3 times and not been updated with the actual providers. So you then play and chase the cattle beast around the owners until you find out that they might be a finishing farm, they might have just bought them. But equally, we can, if we need to get it, we can. Yeah.
In general, sorry, through the chair, there's one member there dealing with the cattle beast or beasts. As you can appreciate, it's extremely difficult to try and get close enough to get that number.
How does this stack up with the neighbouring councils, ICC and Gore, in terms of their policies? And
I haven't looked at this, Mr. Chair, but I would be confident that the fact that with $50 as a base cost, which most people will qualify for, and it's shown in the report, also we're not raising the fees again this year, because sticking with the idea that the people who make us have this service, i.e. the ones who are bad dog owners, we're catching them more now. We're taking it out on them. As a fair, in my opinion, I have no sympathy for people who don't set up to their responsibilities for dogs. If you have a dog, be responsible for it. And so therefore we haven't had to raise the fees up again. We don't know what next year will bring, but I would hope that we'll get a reduction in unregistered dogs, which means we can then concentrate on other things like dangerous dogs, menacing dog visits, and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So this next question ties into my earlier question, but just around the mileage, and given the cost of that at the moment, then your vehicles will be diesel too that you're using. So if that carries on in that trajectory, because you've got a fixed charge here of the mileage, we could end up with the ratepayer actually subsidising it a bit more than the 6%. So is that mileage able to be, I guess, price proof?
It's across council.
Yeah, it's across council mileage.
$17, so we can't change that. We try and reduce our travel as much as we possibly can, and double up in vehicles going to locations. We're not taking 2 vehicles, and if things can be dealt with over the phone, we'll do that. But there definitely is, for the face-to-face interaction, is gold, and a lot of it to try and educate.
Across the group, we're trying to do remote inspections more. So if it's, for example, an RMA condition or a consent that somebody put a driveway in, we'll phone up and say, look, to save us having to come to you and you having to be inconvenienced, can you go down with your smartphone and a tape measure and then just do it on the site? And some people will do it. There's a limitation on that. I mean, in the building team, we offer that to pretty much everybody, but we're only getting 20% doing it remotely. And that's because they like to have a building inspector to double check their work. And again, that's one of those things. But on things like dog control, if we told someone they need to fix a fence or, move a dog kennel away from an area, we can normally get that support from, depending on the individual. So we're trying to think of clever ways of doing it. We already sort of try and knock 5 or 6 jobs on the head in, mainly places like where I live in Winton, where an awful lot of unreasonable dog owners live. I'm not one of them, but we try to group the jobs so that we limit the travel. Just sensible stuff like that, really.
Cool. And I think in this report actually reflects it. It's not often that we're not increasing charges on things as a sector, and I think it reflective of the good work that's been done to get to this point. And it's nice to have a report where we're not actually approving an increase in charges. So, yeah, I think we need to recognise that. Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question back to stock control. Is there any provision for, say, confiscation of animals and they pay a bond to get them back or something, just to help recover those costs?
For you, Mr. Chair, the Animal Impounding Act is 1955, so it's a little bit limited. We have a per head cost for recovery here, which is realistic. We can put animals into temporary pounds, and we can sell the animals if they don't come up with the money. Okay. It's a pretty convoluted process. We do have a stock pound in Riverton, but of course it's the expense of physically moving animals. Then again, we have droving costs and all that sort of thing. And cattle beasts are pretty expensive as cattle. Sheep, again, people want them back normally. But the big one for us, if they ever do get out, is deer. You can't really do an awful lot about them because you need to get them into a high fence paddock. So we would have to be inventive there. But yes, we can recover costs. The worst places is where you have remote places with bad fencing and neighbour disputes. And then it just turns into a bit of a quagmire for us because they may not be there, they might be there, or gates get removed from hinges and stuff like that. But thankfully, we don't have a lot of that problem here at the moment. Thank you.
Just a clarification, Adrian, working backwards, would that council rates contribution be about 40,000? Would I be
I'm not sure what it is, sorry, it's on the report. There's actually in the attachment.
17.
1 second.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been looking wrong, thank you.
Yeah, there's the attachment, what's it?
I was presuming what you have given as your calculator for the proposed fees, it should be that, I was working backwards from there, and for me, those two don't mesh.
40,617. So
Yeah, it doesn't quite line up.
Is that not 6%?
Is that 6%? Is that what you're saying?
I'll talk to the accountant because they
Roughly around that amount.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Right.
There's nothing there though. We've got our recommendations here. And I'm not going to read through D line by line because we'll still be here tomorrow. And there is an E dangling on the end there. So we're agreeing to set the dog registration fees and stock control fees effective 1 July 2026, inclusive of GST for the 26-27 registration year as outlined in there. And then A through to C are standard, and then E is that we agree to publicly notify the fees during the month of June 2026, although anyone can see them now if they want to. Someone happy to move? Councillor Dobson, seconded by Councillor Somerville. Any further discussion? Cool. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Adrian. Much appreciated. Okay, we have 20 minutes. And I will take us to 8.4. I believe we've got everyone in the room. Then we have Rob online. Welcome, Rob. So Rob was the commissioner for the hearing in conjunction with Councillor Menzies, and we've got Alex and Gavin coming up to this is on page 23 of the agenda, so we're bouncing around everywhere. Can you hear us, Rob?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, thank you. Over to Elise or Gavin.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're here today to ask Council to receive and make a final decision on Plan Change 4, which is PC4, which amends noise standards in the district plan for the Fonterra Edendale Dairy Plant. The recommendation is to approve PC4 with amendments as recommended by the hearing panel. We followed the process. PC4 was accepted by Council in July 2025 and limited notified in August 2025. 3 submissions were received by neighbouring residents, 2 opposed, 1 neutral. The hearing was held in Invercargill on the 23rd of February 2026 before an independent commissioner, Rob van Bochthuizen. Sorry, I tried too hard at that, I think. And Councillor Menzies. The hearing panel issued its recommendation report on the 9th of March 2026. The 3 options before Council are option 1, approve with panel's amendments. It provides regulatory certainty, implements hearing outcomes, and improves DMP requirements, noise management plan requirements. Option 2 is to approve as notified. This misses the improvements agreed through the expert conferencing, and 3 is decline. But as I said before, the recommendation is to approve PC4 with amendments as recommended by the hearing panel. And I'll open up for questions, and we have our hearing commissioner here.
Thanks, Lise. Is there anything that Councillor Menzies or Rob would like to add before we go into questions?
Well, for me, I think the very experienced independent commissioner will be able to make very informed comments there should he wish to. But just probably the only comment I had, it was a very strong, robust process and ably led by the independent commissioner.
I've just got it's a totally random question, but it just came to me just before out of curiosity, because I know the government halted any plan changes. Did we have to do anything special, or was this already in motion before that came through?
This was already underway before that deadline.
Are there any other questions from the table? It's a very thorough report.
Oh, it's not a question. Just see on attachment B on page 59.77, dairy spelt wrong with the diary. If that
Human thesaurus.
Well done, that man.
Through the chair, on that note, did you also notice it was missing Councillor Menzies' signature, but that's since been added?
Through you, Worship. Yeah, just a question around one of the submitters raising concerns primarily around the noise issues. It looks like they also raise concerns around vibration, headlights and odours and effects on their family's health and well-being. Is there any dialogue or comment around that within the report?
I think that might be for the Commissioner.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, in the report we do know that those concerns were expressed, however they're outside the scope of the plan change. So certainly in terms of effects of noise on the health of the submitters, we did consider those issues, but the other matters we weren't able to consider because they simply weren't in scope.
Just one other thing on page 94, I'm sure it is, the diagram there, or figure 5, where that boundary goes through that 46 Salford Street diagonally, sort of right across the middle. Has that been adjusted to go around the boundary of that section, or is that where the boundary would be? And would that make any difference if someone was wanting to build a house in the middle of that section?
Is that page 94?
It's page 94 of our agenda.
Through your chair, there has been, through the joint witness statement, if you look through that document, you'll be able to see that that has been extended to actually just
go around
encapsulate.
it. Yeah. Well, I thought I saw that, but I wasn't sure that's what it really said. So, yeah.
So that's part of the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Good.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Phyllis. I'm pretty new to this, so I'm just wanting clarity. So page 78 of the agenda, I think it's page 33 of it's in the appendix B, anyway, of the report. So it's got the summary of decision requested on some of these things. Some of them are mentioned except in part. So, for example, of like provide acoustic insulation for affected properties, including submitters' property. The officer recommendation is except in part. These recommendations that are being accepted, are they explicitly in the conditions? Because we're talking about the plan change in the district plan itself. Are these recommendations, I'm struggling to see how these recommendations are applied to the decision being made today, or ensuring that those decisions being accepted are going along with the plan change decision.
Through you, Your Worship, I'll answer first and then I might hand over to Rob again. So those were our recommendations, or the consultant who is doing the expert report for us were the recommendations to the hearing. So, for example, the one you identify, except in part, so there was a series of points in the body of the Section 42 report that went to the hearing. Commissioner Van Voorthuizen and Councillor Menzies considered those as part of their decision. So everything that's in that summary has been addressed in some form or another during the hearing process. I might hand over to
So I guess that's the clarity I'm looking for. So these except in part are advice to the hearing, not the advice from the hearing to us of what's been accepted. So what are the outcomes of this table?
That's a good question.
There is another table, if I'm not wrong, sorry, Your Worship, for you, which says, here are the recommendations. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. And the hearing panel. Where is that one? That is 45.
Of the agenda.
Of the agenda. Page 45 of the agenda has recommendations and submissions.
Oh, so this is where I saw it again. Yeah.
Yeah. So the appendix 3, if I've read that correctly, is the hearing panel's recommendations. Is that correct? I've just got it.
So the one that Councillor Wilson's referring to fed into the panel.
That's correct. So the officers prepare recommendations that goes to the hearing panel. The hearing panel considered it. The hearing panel's recommendations are on page 45. I am correct, aren't I, Rob? That those are your, yep.
Yeah, that's correct. So the first table that the councillor referred to were the staff recommendations to us, and then the panel's recommendations to you are recorded on page 45 of the agenda. So that's where we reflected on the advice of the officers, and then having heard the submitters and the evidence, we then recommend to you about those decisions requested.
So, for example, this is where the consideration of offset of loss to property values is considered outside the scope. Why that led to
correct. Yep, that's correct. That's a good example of that.
Yeah, does that answer your question, Councillor?
I guess it does, yeah. I mean, I don't understand quite the scope of these. The consideration is the scope of the district plan change, but the outcomes and other conditions
So that
fit within the scope of that conversation, I guess.
So through you, Chair, that is the point that the Commissioner made earlier, is that, so let's just say compensation or changes to are not within the scope, and therefore that's what the hearing panel has, that's the decision they have reached, and that's the recommendation they're making to council. That won't be considered, so their recommendation is we reject that particular one.
And is that because the RMA doesn't provide the ability for such recognition or offsets to be gathered through this process?
So, if I may say, it's more in relation to the scope that we as a hearing panel have. So we can only recommend to you changes to the provisions of the district plan that were actually notified as part of the plan change in response to submissions. So other initiatives that submitters sought, for example, recognition of the financial impacts of residents on Frontiera to offset property values. I mean, those matters are simply out of scope and they're not reflected in the provisions that were actually notified. So we were constrained in considering the relief sought by the submitters in terms of what actually had been notified in the plan change to start with, rather than those other matters that were of concern to them.
So can I,
Yeah, sure.
Your Worship, because these processes come in front of you not very often. So I'm just going to quickly draw a parallel to any other consultation that you might be doing. So if your proposal itself has not considered a matter, and let's just think about the dog policy that came up a little while ago, and there were some suggestions from the community of certain changes, dogs in schools, if I remember correctly, that was outside of the scope of what you were actually consulting on. It was outside of the scope, in this case, of the notification process and what the plan change required. You did not go there. That wasn't the proposal. So for consideration of those matters, you couldn't consider those as part of, as another way of what.
So if I may ask, so they don't, so we've gone with what the commissioners have suggested, but for the applicants, the submitters who submitted on this, do they have any other recourse, some other forum, if not this? Or is this the end of the story for them? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand, like, will they go somewhere else?
I'll let you.
Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. There are three things. The submitter does have another pathway, depending on council's decision at this point. We then go into an appeal process. So they can make an appeal under the provisions of the RMA against council's decision if they still want to pursue something. In terms of Ms Bonner's submission, Ms Bonner bought that property after the construction of the highway bypass and the new western access. The information about noise was available at the time. That property also is subject to a covenant from the state, from NZTA about highway noise. So that information was available prior to the purchase of the property. In terms of a third pathway, Ms Bonner can still interact with Fonterra as a neighbour in a civil way, as opposed to the RMA. So there are further opportunities, but they weren't
out of this process.
Yeah, outside of scope of this process.
Useful clarification. Thank you to both of you.
Through your chair. Also, what the panel recommended with the amendments are in DV1 R8.1, which is to strengthen the noise management plan and to include specific procedures for traffic on the Western Access Road. Consider speeds, no engine braking, no idling, signage, driver education, complaints resolution, and annual reporting to council. So that has also been bumped out a little bit for her.
Which will address some of those concerns that have been raised, even outside of that scope. Yeah. Cool. So we've got our recommendations here that we're receiving the report titled Approval Plan Change 4, which is everything that is being recognised as significant in terms of Section 6 of the Southland Act, assuming it complies with that decision-making provisions. And D, that we approve Plan Change 4 pursuant to Clause 17 of Schedule 1 to the RMA with amendments as recommended by the hearing panel. Do we have someone in a position to move? Councillor Duffy, by Councillor Dobson. Is there any further discussion on that? Cool. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Lise. Thanks, Gavin. Thanks for meeting.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.
Now, I'm going to potentially be a little bit cheeky and I'm going to try and sneak in one more item before lunch, which we're all voting on. She comes. Which is the Stewart Island fuel budget, unbudgeted expenditure. We didn't budget for this. I see Hartley's. This is on page 135 of our agenda. Thank you, Brent.
Since you're sneaking it in, we could make it really, really quick. And just highlight the fact that on the 9th of April at the Community Board meeting, the Stewart Island Rakiura Community Board resolved to recommend a resolution was made to recommend the 250, the recommendation that's in the report. I won't go through it. You understand what it is. So 250k unbudgeted expenditure, as well as the increase by 4 cents per kilowatt to meet the increase in diesel requirements that are happening because of what's going on around the world. Might leave it like that. It probably covers it off.
Yeah, kind of speaks for itself, I guess. The graph certainly, if a picture paints 1,000 words, I think that graph paints about.
Oh, yeah, correct.
So, quite daunting. Any questions? Anything you'd like to add, Spraggan, other than probably you
I'd just like to move it.
Cool. Well, we've got our recommendations there, A through to E. Noting that we're going to be increasing the price as per the Community Board recommendation from 85 cents to 89 cents GST inclusive. Councillor Spraggan wants to move it.
I'll just add to that too, that there has been discussion on the island, and the island's actually amazed that we can hold it at that figure, but there is a reason for that figure, is because it's the quickest way to get the increase through. If we go above 5%, then we've got to notify every customer individually.
Right. And then, yeah, we'll get the solar project done as soon as possible, and actually becomes not so good. So it's been moved by Councillor Spraggan, seconded by Councillor Somerville. No further discussion. Motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you, Hartley. Thank you, Fran. I think I've covered on that. So just before we go to lunch, our next report, which I'm not going to go into now, but I'm just going to add to the part. So I'm going to move from the chair for the reasons outlined on our agenda on page 141. That we move into public excluded. Do I have a second? Councillor East. Is there any discussion on that at all? Cool. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? That is carried. And now we can break for lunch.